Welcome to Diced Onion, a Warrior podcast. We're your hosts, Angelo and Mike Haggerty. Welcome to another look at another episode of Warrior, the show that is coming quickly to Netflix any day now. Mike, Warrior is going to be on Netflix.
Yeah, very exciting. Very glad to hear it. It'll be another platform, give maybe more people an opportunity to watch the show, and that's what we really want.
Yeah, Netflix better be like blasting that thing all over everybody's homepage, startup page when they get onto Netflix. And I don't care if the person watches Downton Abbey. I want it to show up on there because you watch Downton Abbey. You might like Warrior.
And maybe if we get lucky, maybe Taylor Swift will date one of the cast members. You never know.
Oh yeah, that would be so funny if like Taylor Swift is dating Chow next.
I'll take it. Whatever helps.
Let's get into this episode, Mike. Season 2, episode 6. The title is To a Man with a Hammer, Everything Looks Like a Nail. Original air date November 6th, 2020. And our pre-credits scene is essentially AH-Sam and Vega sort of picking up where they left off last week. If you recall, AH-Sam said to her, "Do you need a fighter for that tournament still?" And obviously she said, yeah, because that's where they're headed.
Right. And this is you and I were talking before the show started. This is a very special episode. And it's a callback, first of all, say to episode from season 1. I can't think of the title, but you know the one I'm talking about.
The Western one.
Yeah, the Western one. And
right.
And this really hits the vibe of the original Kung Fu show. Because that was, the show Warrior, it's set in San Francisco, a little cosmopolitan, doesn't really have that old West feel. So when we get these little Western type episodes, it really is kind of an extra kick, an extra reward. So
yeah, you almost feel like they pulled a little extra something out of Bruce Lee's writings for this episode.
Right. And so this one's very special, and there's a lot of homages and callbacks in this episode. We're going to go over that, but
yeah,
so I'm pretty excited for this one. And
we do top episode to me.
Yeah, you said top 2, right?
Yeah, top 2 to me at least. I don't know even right now off the top of my head which one's number 1, so that's why I said 2, because I like this one a lot.
Yeah, this one was really good. Yeah, we see AH-Sam and Rosalita. They're walking into town, and she's kind of giving them the background, telling them who their host is going to be, and we see Yung Jun and Hong are there too as well. And they have a little bit of funny banter back and forth, but I don't want to jump too far ahead.
No, that's all right. But it's good because as they're walking and heading over to the tournament, Rosalita's really good at establishing sort of the backstory, right? She explains that the town is owned by Elijah Rooker. He's the guy that owns everything. He's the one that created the tournament. He made it an annual thing. It's a border town. Someone asked, I think it was Yung Jun, maybe it was AH-Sam even, that said, "Are we heading to Mexico?" And she said it's actually a border town. So I guess it straddles both countries. And then we find out, what are they fighting for? A top prize. It's a cash prize of $2,500, which we've learned is a lot of money. I looked it up exactly. I don't know if you did. 76,000 American dollars in 2024.
76,000?
76,000.
Wow. That is quite an inflationary jump.
It is an inflationary jump. Okay. And we're going to get a little ahead of ourselves because we're going to talk about the tournament for a moment here. But when you already picture what kind of tournament this is going to be without knowing it, and knowing that the payout 76 grand, does it sound like it's worth it to put your body on the line for 76 grand?
To potentially get yourself killed for 76 grand? I don't know if there's any number that's worth potentially getting yourself killed, but
yeah,
I guess to them it is. Obviously it is.
Apparently so. And plus, let's not forget exactly how desperate AH-Sam and Yung Jun are to make up the missing chop from the lost opium. So that's the whole motivation for even going out there and fighting some more.
Well, they'll get killed either way.
Right. Your life's on the line either way, I guess. So one choice is the same as the other. We now focus on Hong and Yung Jun here, and you alluded to them having some very funny banter. And Yung Jun, as they're walking, is taking notice of a lot of attractive women as they're making their way through through the area there. And he asks Hong, is this doing anything for you? These nice looking girls. And Hong's like, nope.
And then he proceeds to ask him. He goes, "Are you?" Because he establishes obviously we know Hong is attracted to men. So Young Jun asks him, "So are you attracted to me?" He goes, "No." He goes, "Why not?" He goes, "Well, if you had a sister, would you be attracted to her?" He goes, "Well, I don't have a sister." He goes, "But would you be attracted to her?" He goes, "No." He goes, "Exactly." And then Young Jun is kind of offended, and
Yeah.
it's funny. Hong is really he provides a lot of comic relief, and he's actually taken the edge off his show. I love the character. I love his banter, especially
Yeah.
between the three of them. It is some of the most lighthearted comedic moments of the show, clearly, and it really does help.
Yeah, truly. So, and when Hong walks away from him after establishing that he wouldn't do his own sister, it dawns on Young Jun exactly that it was an insult. And he's like, "Hey," that's sort of where that ends. We now get to the gates, the entrance of Rooker's property, the city proper, and right away we see that you cannot enter with weapons. So everyone is turning their weapons in as they go through this checkpoint. And Young Jun's like, "No way, man, I'm keeping my blades. I don't get separated from my blades." But then we see exactly what happens to someone who tries to bring a weapon in.
Yeah, it doesn't work out well for that gentleman because the guard shoots him in the back of the head, kills him, and then Young Jun proceeds to hand over his knives. He goes, "Not a fucking word
And
about this."
that and that ends the opening scene.
But before we get out of the opening scene, because like I said, this show is just rife with the homages.
Yeah, what'd you
Can I
catch
start
here?
with? Yeah, can I start with the first one because it's a glaring, flaming red toe of an homage. They're they're going to a fighting tournament,
Yeah,
right? What is that reminiscent of? Enter the Dragon, obviously.
right, right.
So that's the first, and there's going to be a couple of them, but that's the first one.
I didn't even think of that one, to tell you the truth. I didn't even make the Enter the Dragon tournament connection. I was just so focused on the episode, but you're absolutely right.
Right. Well, they're showing up to this remote area. No weapons are allowed. Because remember, that was a plot point in
That
Enter the
was a part
Dragon.
of the show. Yeah, the
There were
movie.
no weapons allowed. And also, supposedly, I read, by the way, not to digress, that Bruce Lee actually wanted his character. He wanted there to be weapons, but that was a director's choice. They didn't want any weapons. They wanted to focus on
I feel
strictly the
like I've
martial
read
arts.
that. I feel like I've read
Yeah.
that once before. That's a good one, Mike.
Yeah.
Well caught. All right, so now we're back from credits, and it's AH-Sam and crew. There's sort of a little merry band of four, and they are checking in to their rather shabby accommodations, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, and I belong to a couple of social media groups that has a that are accounts for old West and old photos of like old anything from the early 20th century and the early 19th or late 19th century. And I was actually looking at a couple of hotel rooms today from like 1901, and they look like shanties. They look like shacks. And I guess this was like the mid-level uh, standard you would get back in the day. But to me, they all look like pretty crappy, actually. But so let's assume that this is a mid-level mid-level hotel.
This isn't the cheapest room on Expedia, but it's not the most expensive one.
No, this is probably mid-range, I'm guessing, for the time frame.
It's funny because Young Jun tells Hong he's sleeping on the floor, and even Hong was like, "Well, I've slept on worse." So point well made by you yet again. This is where Young Jun starts talking to AH-Sam, and he asks about his relationship with Rosalita Vega. He kind of suspects that they're doing something when we know essentially that they have not, and AH-Sam says so, right? And
It's all
he says, "Come
business.
on." Yeah, it's all business. He goes, "Come on, yes, you are." And that's when AH-Sam replies the episode title, "To a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail." So as we know, Young Jun is in a like constant state of like semi arousal throughout the throughout the show. And once again, it is just business between me and Vega is the message delivered from AH-Sam there. And that's when Young Jun lets a cat kind of out of the bag in front of Hong when he when AH-Sam says, "I'm being careful," and response from Young Jun is, "You, the guy who fucked the duck lady that hid our opium?" And Hong's kind of sitting there and he's like, "Wait, what?"
and then and then AH-Sam proceeds to say, "Long story," and then Hong says, "Well, we have several hours until dinner." Good point.
after AH-Sam leaves, that's when AH-Sam takes his leave to go out for a walk, I guess. And Hong says to Young Jun, "He's a complicated man." And Young Jun's like, yeah, that he is, Hong, that he is.
And I flash back to, there's no reason for me to flash back this, but it reminded me of the song by Isaac Hayes, Shaft, complicated man no one understands about his woman. I thought they were going to do something with that, but no, it was just a line.
No
But
woman.
anyway, yeah, I digress.
Yeah. All right. So AH-Sam indeed takes off to take a stroll, and he's essentially checking out the surroundings. He's looking at what's going on in Rooker's town here, and ends up going into a bar. And he's standing kind of near the door, surveying the scene, and he gets bumped by a guy, a pretty cocky Aussie dude.
Right, and this is going to be my second homage, I think. I'm not sure if this is an homage. I don't know if you know where I'm going with this.
Maybe go ahead. I'm thinking Yul Brynner and Westworld.
No, what I was thinking, but that's very good actually. What I'm thinking is the very minor character in Enter the Dragon, the Australian guy in the boat that Bruce Lee encounters, and
nice.
He's kind of bullying everyone. And
That's
I don't know if that was right. I don't know if that was intentional though. I could be, but it reminds me of that. This whole scene and that character.
Well, he does bump AH-Sam from sort of like the side behind as he's walking in, and he even has a comment for him too, something like a "Watch where the fuck you're standing, mate."
That's a good accent, by the way.
That's
a really good Australian accent. Huh?
And that's when they confront, right? AH-Sam never seems to be able to avoid these situations. Now he's nose to nose with this very big, by the way, I might add, cocky Aussie guy, and his message to AH-Sam is, "You got a problem with me?"
Yeah. And I forget his name, but I think the actor is actually or was legit an MMA fighter. I think he was.
Ah, is that right? I didn't look up his name either. I should have.
Yeah, my bad. But yeah, they're nose to nose. We have a bit of a confrontation here. But then who comes in to make the save?
Yeah, Vega. But before she does, though, they have a nice little exchange, which I wrote down, which is, "You got a problem?" And AH-Sam said, "Yeah, my problem is your hand is on me." And he goes, "Oh, your English is pretty good, mate." And he's like, "What are you gonna do about it?" And then like that's when Vega walks in, and she pretty much stops it. And he tells AH-Sam he's a dead man. And that's when a cop pops in, or a lawman, or whatever you want to call him in a private town like this, to make sure everything is cool, and everyone kind of plays their roles and brushes it off. She tells him to chill out too.
Yeah, save it for the fights.
When the guy says to AH-Sam, "You're a dead man," AH-Sam's like, "Yeah, I get that a lot."
A lot of great dialogue in this. A lot of great dialogue in this show, but especially this episode.
Yeah, I mean, we're only like 15 minutes, not even into the episode, and there's been a number of excellent lines. Vega tells AH-Sam she has to attend to some business, and tells him, like, "Just chill out. Can I trust you to sort of stay out of trouble while I'm not around?" And he assures her that they'll be okay. Who knows what this business is she has to attend to, but regardless of which, the scene now cuts away to the big welcome dinner, sort of like the the gathering of the gladiators before the feast, before the slaughter.
And this brings me to, this actually just occurred to me too, the second you said that, my next homage, and it reminds me of the gathering dinner in Enter the Dragon, when they're all gathered together at Han's place.
There was one in that.
The movie, there was.
Right? Yeah, Enter the Dragon.
Yeah, Enter the Dragon.
Yeah, Enter the Dragon. Yeah.
Yeah. And this reminded me of, actually, it didn't occur to me till like this second I thought of it.
This episode is so quickly paced, that unlike some of the previous episodes, when I was taking my notes, I was sort of falling behind, and I had to pause a bit more than I might typically do. And I think because of the pace of the episode, and this is just for me, obviously not for you, because you picked up on a number of them, all of the like homages, which as you bring them up, I'm aware of, all of them just zoomed right by me. I picked up I wrote no homages for this one. I was so zoned in on the actual episode that I just missed them all.
Well, also, full disclosure, I did look up a couple on IMDb. I love the trivia section on IMDb, and they had a few of them, but some of them I did this, like this one and the Australian guy were my own interpretations. So
at the welcome dinner, they sit down at a table to eat. We see the Aussie guy again, and AH-Sam gives him a little AH-Sam wink. Hong is taking it all in, and Hong, being the enigmatic character that he is, You never know what kind of curveball you're going to get out of this guy. Out of all the things that's going on around him, he spots a pair of like fancy cowboy boots on a guy's feet, and he's like, "Ooh, me want." And he was like all into these boots, and you're like, "What's up with that?" What a weird thing, kind of, for a guy who's basically a gangster, like that was what he was zoned in on. But there it is, and they were kind of cool looking boots.
Yeah, and he's always good for comic relief. I think that's one of my favorite things. Like I was saying before, that Han, he really does sort of he ups the comedic. I mean, not too much. You don't want it to be stupid. You don't want there to be like slapstick, but there has to be just enough comedy so the show is not completely, because the show can be pretty dark at times. It's very violent and can be very dark. So he kind of balances that out a little bit, and that's what I appreciate.
Nicely.
Yeah,
he breaks it up nicely. This is the point now where we finally get to meet Elijah Rooker, the organizer and the host of all of these festivities, and he shows up. He's got what I think is his wife with him. We find out later on that it is, and he takes his moment to speak, right? The man of the hour, and he welcomes everybody and essentially tells his backstory a little bit, right, about when he settled in Mexico originally. And this is where I caught something that I hadn't caught in either of the several times I'd seen the episode, Mike, which is when he tells the backstory and says, when I settled here 20 years ago, they actually cut away to Vega, and she has sort of a visceral or emotional response to that. You can sort of see it. It's a split-second moment. She swallows hard, and she doesn't have a look on her face of like happy to be here, so to speak. And it's very quick and very subtle, but I caught it.
Very good. Yeah, there was a little bit of a little subtle moment. Yeah, something there.
Something's going on there, and I'm not sure just yet what it is at this point. He also says, just like you guys, I came here to find my fortune, and now here you are to find your fortune. And he then kind of, I guess, paints them as gladiators, right? The last line of hand-to-hand combat ever since the invention of the gun, right? It's like the gun replaced hand-to-hand combat, but you guys are like a throwback. And here's to you, right? And this is when he introduces his wife. That's when we find out that this is his wife, and it's sort of may the best man win.
Yeah, and well, obviously, since this area used to be part of Mexico, and he's married now, so he points out, makes everyone a little uncomfortable. He left his wife for this Mexican woman.
Right, he does say that. Right, he goes, "This one, I had to leave my wife for this one," or something. He said, right?
Yeah. And he points out that she's Mexican, which seems to also, I think there was a little bit of a reaction from Rosalita on that one too.
There was, right, and that's a second time now. Good catch, because there was a second, like, there's a something's up reaction there. Like, I'm like, what's going on? And then just as he's done speaking, boom, the tournament is on. Just like that, the bell rings, and they begin the fight. And who is it? None other than our Australian friend,
Dolph Jagger.
Dolph Jagger. Thank you, Dolph Jagger. And he's fighting like a Killer Khan looking dude.
Oh, rest in peace. He just passed away, by the way.
Yes, he did just pass away.
Rest in peace.
And Dolph takes a good shot to the face, which I didn't expect. But that all that did was fire him up, because then he proceeds to just pummel this guy, doesn't he?
Yeah, it looks like he wins, and then he looks like he kills him. He snaps his neck.
Yeah, he snaps. Anyway. Yeah, and then he glares at AH-Sam.
Yeah, he's just itching to get at him.
And then AH-Sam does a toast with his glass to him, and Yung Jun's like, "Did I miss something?"
Yung Jun in his own way does provide comedic relief too. He's always good for those little what the hell moments.
AH-Sam's response is great when he asks, "Did I miss something?" He says, "We had a moment."
We had a tender moment.
Vega gets up and leaves to go off to be on her own at this stage. Sam goes and he finds her, and she says something like, "It's just good to be in the quiet for a little while." And they start to admire what's around them. Like, wow, look at all this land. And she explains to him that this used to be Mexico before the land, or what do you call the maps were drawn or whatever.
Right, and great cinematography here, by the way.
I mean, it's
We
gorgeous
don't
area, right?
right, we don't talk enough about the cinematography, especially when they go out west like that. Because let's face it, the West is some of the most beautiful territory in the United States.
Yeah.
The arid deserts, it's beautiful. The mountains, and it was gorgeous. It was a gorgeous scene. I
Which
loved
I
it for
think was
that.
shot in South Africa.
Was it really?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of
Oh.
this was shot in South Africa. I don't know how much was actually shot in the US, if any.
Yeah, a lot of things aren't shot in the U.S. anymore.
Right, right.
Mm.
Um, but this is a good quiet away from the action moment. There's always one, right? Every action movie's got it. Every episode that's filled with lots of dark activity always seems to have that like respite where there's some tenderness. And this is where they get to kind of know each other just a little bit. Where Vega's like, you come to my place, you fight, you win, but I don't really know anything else about you.
And he proceeds to give her his backstory. And what the hell? He can mention he came to America for his sister because she's not going to know it's My Ling. I mean,
Right.
almost no one on the show knows. So what the hell? Why not? So he does.
Correct.
He lays out his backstory, and then she lays out her backstory, and they kind of share the immigrant experience here. And that's kind of always been the overarching theme of the show is the immigrant experience, and
True.
that's kind of always that's never really kind of out of reach. It's always the subtext. I would say of almost every episode, right? We see it in the interactions with AH-Sam and with Leary and really the immigrant experience in America is it's always been sort of the backbone of this show. And here we're getting another example of that.
Yeah, and Vega, in her telling of her story, shares with Hassan that she has a sister also, and then she gets like a little bit bitter, right? Which is like sort of like they come here, they take away everything from you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so clearly there's some bitterness bubbling here with Rosalita. They're kind of standing close at this point, and it sure looks like they're about to kiss. But Rosalita, being the prudent business person that she is, says something like, "We're not going to do this."
Yeah, and I was flashing back to Mickey from Rocky, how women weaken legs, and how that old trope that fighters aren't supposed to engage in physical activity before a fight. So maybe that was part of it. I don't know.
Maybe she's just, the big tournament really starts the next day, right? So she wants him fresh. So scene ends. It's now sunrise. It's tournament time, and there's Dolph Jagger fighting yet again. And AH-Sam is standing there watching him and definitely studying him. There's no question about it because they keep kind of zooming in on AH-Sam's eyes. And I gotta say, during this fight and during the tournament, there is some great music going on in the background. The soundtrack is awesome. It's kind of like a rock music-ish soundtrack, and I really love that. Later on during the episode, the music changes where it's more of a Mexican sort of inspired beat, but it is the show's theme song, just arranged a little differently.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah. I forget exactly which scene. It's not in this part. It's a little later on in the episode. Maybe I made the note, but definitely just popped into my head that as the background music was going on, you can hear the show's theme song being played in a Mexican rhythm, which was, I thought, pretty cool too.
Nice.
This is where after Dolph wins his fight, Vega's standing next to him, and she says to him, "You think you can take him?"
Yeah.
And AH-Sam says, "Yeah." She says, "Good, because you're fighting him next."
Yeah, and he seems a little thrown off by that. He seems a little bit almost afraid.
Yeah.
And we know
maybe too.
Yeah, surprised, afraid, and this is kind of interesting because you don't know where the show is establishing. This episode is establishing that Jagger is a pretty good fighter, but we don't know if he's in a league of like a Lee Young or even of a Leary or anything. All we know is he's beating these other guys, kind of like in pro wrestling when the new guy shows up in the territory and he beat all the preliminaries. And that's what that was the first main event.
Yeah, King Kong Moscow won all his matches until he ran into Hulk Hogan or Bob Backlund, rather.
Or Bob Backlund, right.
So it's time now for the big fight against Dolph Jagger, and it's pep talk time. And Young Jun first is like, "Hey, man, we need this money bad." So my advice is And the last time I bet on you, you whiffed. He had to throw that in there. Like, wow, thanks, pal. And he says, so
There's a motivational speech
yeah,
for you.
exactly. So don't lose. That's what he says. Vega's just a little bit more helpful, but not much. Because she says, finish him fast, before he kills you. So there it is. And that is the advice. And the bell rings, and here comes Dolph. He chases, he like just bears right down on AH-Sam. And AH-Sam, this is great. I mean, boom. AH-Sam finishes him with a kick, boom, swiftly, and he hits the ground. He's out, and AH-Sam looks at them and he says, finished. That was the one thing I did not expect, Mike. I didn't expect the writers. I didn't expect the story to have all this setup between AH-Sam and Dolph, right? These couple of scenes that they shared together where the animosity is building for the fight to be almost anticlimactic in a sense, where it's not even a fight. It lasted all of 1 second.
Yeah, and talk about throwing us a curveball. That was pretty funny. I got a kick because I think that's what they were going for, like build up the anticipation and then, oh, okay, he just wiped him out in like one kick. I thought that was funny. I think I know what they were going for there. And
here's an homage for you then, in a sense. For me, it was almost the equivalent of that crazy, like fancy schmancy swordsman in Raiders of the Lost Ark that Indiana Jones just pulls out his gun and shoots him. That's what Dolph Jagger was. He was all noise, all bluster, and then it was just like, pah, paper tiger.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I didn't pick up on that. That's a good one. I could see that. Yeah, that works.
Yeah. So now the tournament is progressing. Dolph is out of the picture, and we're seeing a couple of the other guys that are in the mix here, and we get a glimpse of some pretty good fighters along the way of this montage of fights. We see AH-Sam winning again, and he advancing, obviously. And then the story of the tournament focuses in on another martial arts guy. And he's got some skills as well. And he seems to be pretty effective and maybe even a match for AH-Sam. So these two finally meet up in about now. And it's AH-Sam versus the other martial arts guy. And it's a contest for a little bit, but AH-Sam manages to finish him off.
Well, you know what? I was actually thinking of another opponent because it brings me to my other homage.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking of the guy with the claws, with the fingernails.
Oh, the guy that he beat, the previous guy that I had alluded to, but I didn't get very detailed about.
Right. And this one was a definite homage. And I got this from IMDb. He scratches him across the chest and he has 3 scratch marks.
Yes.
And if you remember from Enter the Dragon, when Bruce Lee fights Han and Han has the claw, the same 3 scratch marks across the chest. The same thing. So sorry, that's what I was focused on.
It's funny because when I saw it and I saw the scratches, I was like, oh, that's like Bruce Lee in the one movie. And I couldn't remember what movie, but I didn't write down anything about an homage, unfortunately. So AH-Sam wins the bout against the other martial arts guy. And at this point, we see Mrs. Rooker whisper something to Mr. Rooker. And then that's when his, I guess the guy's like his bodyguard, approaches AH-Sam and Vega, and he invites them on behalf of the host to lunch at the main house tomorrow, which they gladly accept, of course. What's going on there? Like, you wonder why they're being invited. Is it just his exceptional fighting or what? Like, I found that to be a little curious.
Well, obviously, AH-Sam's fighting got his attention.
Yeah, I guess so.
Rooker's a fight fan, and he appreciates violence, and he appreciates people who are good at violence. So
yeah, I guess so. You're right about that. The scene cuts away now to Hong off on his own. I'm not even sure where he is, but he's somewhere in town there. But it's clear he's out to pick a fight. And 3 guys find him, and they make like some negative comment about the Chinese. That's the problem with the Chinese. They're everywhere. And that's when Hong pulls out his chain, and he beats them all pretty easily, doesn't he?
Yeah, there was one little slightly funny moment towards the beginning of the fight where one guy hits him and Han just kind of he does this like, all right, hold up a minute. They all do kind of wait, and then he pulls out the chain again, and then he proceeds to
Right, like he feigns like, all right, I've had enough almost, and that's
and it
it.
is,
Yeah, I didn't write that in there. And then he has another funny thing he does at the end of the fight after he beats the crap out of these guys and shows off again what a great fighter he is. He stops and he goes, and he fixes his hair and he smiles like a pretty little girl. That's what I wrote down there. Very, very happy with himself. And that is where the scene ends. And I'm like, what the hell was that scene all about? Like, why is Hong out there fighting three dudes? And we don't really know why.
well, at first I thought he was just there out to kind of protect AH-Sam's back because they were trailing AH-Sam and Rosalita. I thought that's where that was at
Oh,
least part of it.
maybe I didn't even think of that. We're now back to AH-Sam and Vega, and they're together. And here we are, like reminiscent to the other scene where they almost kiss. And she says, we're not going to do this. Now they almost do it again. And it felt like we're going to do this, I think she said. And then now they do.
Yeah, they get biblical with each other, and I don't know why she decided now was the right time. Maybe she just wanted him to get through the first part of the tournament. I don't know.
Can I,
I don't
say?
know.
Can I say I wrote a note here, and I have to ask. Right, we're now a season and a half into this episode. I don't know how many it is now. I didn't actually count, but AH-Sam has had the hottest chicks on the show ever since he got to America, and damn it, he is making things look easy. He's barely in the country, and he's had Rosalita. Now him and Rosalita Vega do it here. They have a very tender scene, and I also wrote what happened to no sex before the fight, which is what Mickey was railing about in Rocky. But going back to AH-Sam for a minute, he's barely in America, and he has managed to have sex with at least 4 or 5 different girls, and at least 2 of them non-Chinese.
And not to mention a variety of working women, of whores. So that's
has he though? AH-Sam doesn't really go to the whores. That's Yung Jun's thing. If you notice in all the horse scenes, he never really hooks up with one.
Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Okay.
Only a toy.
But
and
even
she didn't charge him, I don't think.
But didn't even she spurn him because the toy is more into women?
I don't know, but I think he still him and her had they did it in an episode.
I have to go back and watch. I'm not.
Yeah,
I believe you. Okay, yeah. I must have missed that. Okay.
Yeah, you didn't miss it. It's hard to recall. That's why I said I didn't write it or try to figure out how many. But like as we're counting, it's 4 or 5 already. All right, Hong is back at the bar, and he sits down, and Yung Jun is there with, as we're just talking about, one of his hookers. And he says, all right, listen, you stay here. I'm going to the room to get sticky. All right. And Hong has another great line here. He's like, all right, what? You'll be back in about 10 minutes.
And then Yung Jun says, fuck you.
Fuck you. And Hong, very proud of himself. That's when he leans back. He leans back and puts his hands behind his head and kicks his feet up on the table and crosses them one over the other. And that's when we see
the boots.
The boots are on his feet. So that whole fight back there 2 scenes or 3 scenes ago was his excuse to kick the crap out of the guy who had the boots that he was on earlier in the episode, and now he's the owner of the boots.
So you have 2 reasons.
We're back now to Vega and AH-Sam. They are now post in their tender moment. They're in each other's arms in bed, and she says similar to what other people have said to AH-Sam, which is, I know gangsters and you're no gangster. You don't have to go back to San Francisco after this tournament is over. And that's when he starts talking about loyalty.
Yeah, and he talks about how, like she says, why don't you go back to China? And he goes, there's nothing there for me anymore.
Right.
And yeah, now it looks like AH-Sam is sort of developing a sort of loyalty. But I'm not sure, at least, is it a loyalty to the Tong? Is it to Yung Jun? Or is it to the Chinese people overall? Chinese Americans, I should say.
Or just the concept of loyalty, because he didn't say to anyone. He just says, well, what about loyalty? Right. So he didn't say, I'm loyal to Yung Jun. I'm loyal to the Tong. I'm loyal to this. I'm loyal to that. I think he's looking for something to be loyal to. And that's why he asked her. Because if she would have said, fuck loyalty, he would have been like, yeah, fuck loyalty. I really believe that. Like Assam, he can be easily led in many ways. Um,
Hmm.
but that is where the scene ends, and there's nothing back home for me in China, and scene. We're now at Rooker's. It's lunch at Rooker's house, and they're sitting around the table, and it is Rooker. It is his wife. It is his bodyguard, a guy named Smits. Smits is a Dutch name. I'm going to assume the character is also a Dutchman. Um, then you've got, of course, Assam. You've got Rosalita. I'm sorry, yeah, Rosalita. That's everybody at the table, and clearly, like you said earlier, Mike, Rooker is interested in Assam.
Right, and kind of not really. I won't say it's an homage, but it reminded me. It was a little reminiscent of the scene in Enter the Dragon, where Han wanted to what's his name, John Saxon's character, to join his. In that case, it was a drug deal, a drug business,
Right.
and I don't think it was really an homage. I didn't even really think of it. Just I'll say it just sort of reminded me of that.
Sure.
The big villain
A
wants
little
to
bit of
hire.
recall.
Yeah, a little bit of recall, but when the villain wants to hire one of the main characters to join his business, to join his empire.
And that's what happens here. He offers Assam work to stay behind and train his bodyguards and his army, I guess, in a sense, in some of the martial arts. And he keeps calling Assam, Sam, Sam. Let me get right to the point, Sam.
Yeah, I think
And
that was a way to just show how ignorant his character was.
correct.
Yeah.
Because that is such an American thing to do to people's names. Even today, very American people will butcher anyone's name who is outside of the Bob, Mike, Bill range, right? That's for sure. So before he
Or Bruce.
what's that?
Or Bruce.
Or Bruce, right? Before he offers him the job, he talks about their love of fighting as something they have in common. He asks Assam where he trained and all that. And then he says, and I see we also have a taste for Mexican women, he goes. So I thought that was interesting, like that he made that judgment of Vega and Assam as being an item beyond just business, perhaps.
He kind of jumped to a conclusion, and I think this Rooker is really displayed as a very ignorant, very I wrote crass.
Crass.
I found to be very crass, ignorant, and really kind of coming off as kind of a blowhard. And he's not, obviously we know he left his wife, so he's not a very sympathetic character.
Yeah, you don't really like him very much, and who does. You could tell that he doesn't bring a whole lot of likability to the table. The thing he says when he asks Assam if he wants to stay and train the guys is with his bodyguard, obviously head bodyguard, sitting right there. He says, "Now, don't get me wrong, Smits and his men are excellent, but you can always use a little more training there, couldn't you, Smits?" And Smits says very, very coyly almost to Assam. He says, "You got to move to stop a bullet." And Assam had to admit, he's like, "I do not."
No, there is no move to stop a bullet in Kung
There's
Fu.
no move to stop a bullet. And Assam then declines to work for him. Yeah, respectfully declines to take take the work. And Rooker says, "Well, all right, I understand, but I can be very persuasive." So he goes, "Besides, I wore this one down," and he points to his wife, "Didn't I?" And she's like, "Yes, you did." That's when Vega asks him about his gun.
Yeah, because when we first see Rooker, he shows his gun at the big banquet dinner.
Right, when he was talking about weapons, right? The gun replacing the fists.
Right, and so that's actually one of the cool things about this episode and the show overall. These little things that pop that you don't think about in the moment, but then they become major plot points, or they become a plot point elsewhere. And this gun is an example of that.
Everything means something in this show. Nothing is written or shown to you without a purpose behind it, even if we don't know it at the moment, or even if we don't, as sometimes not such deep viewers, we can also look just at the surface. Even if we've missed it, it still meant something.
Right. And this dinner, or lunch rather, is a very pivotal scene in the show. This is kind of where this whole episode was sort of going. And then we get into Rosalita, and she has to see the gun. And of course, before she gets the gun, Smits, being the good bodyguard that he is, he takes out the bullets, and they say, "Well, nothing personal."
Well, before you get to that, before she asks about the pistol, or she asks about the pistol, before he hands it to her, he like holds it up and he starts talking about some of the features. Oh, it's got this, it's got that, it's got this. And she says to him, oh, I've noticed the barrel's a little wider than normal. And he's like, ooh, you got a good eye. You know your guns. And that's when he says, here, you could see it. And he gives it to Smits, and the bullets are removed. And then as she's eyeing it up, she says that she's seen one just like it. But he's like, no, you couldn't have. It's a one of a kind piece made for me by some artisan or something, right?
Yeah, some guy.
Yeah. But then she begins to tell a story about when she was a girl living in the area that was once known as Mexico, and then the Americans came.
Right. And you start to see that Rooker's getting a little uncomfortable. And
yeah, he starts like shifting around in his seat a little bit here, doesn't he?
Yeah, and she explains what happened to her family, how her family was slaughtered, and how her father was forced to give over his land and then executed by a gun just like this. And Rooker proceeds to tell her, well, that's a terrible story, but you can see clearly he's uncomfortable and he just wants his gun back and he wants this story to end. And
yeah,
yes,
he. This is where it gets really weird. Like you didn't see this coming here, Mike. I know you want to go on with what's next, right? But like when he's getting uncomfortable, you start to piece it together as the viewer, right? And now those little moments of Rosalita's face being shown in reaction to certain things that Rooker said along the way,
right,
start to mean a little bit more. And it starts to quickly become clear as she starts telling the story that it looks like Rooker might actually be that guy that we're talking about.
And in this scene, AH-Sam is actually kind of in a way representing the audience because he's clueless as to what's going on. AH-Sam has no idea what's happening here. And he's kind of like, he's our eyes in this scene. Like we're seeing it. He's us.
Right.
Because we don't know and he doesn't know what's going on. At the moment, only Rosalita knows what is going on.
That's when the camera zooms in on Rosalita's neck and we see her necklace, and dangling from that necklace is a charm, but it's a bullet.
Right.
And that's when it all starts to boom. Everything starts to happen fast now. She rips her chain off. She cracks the gun open. What the hell's going on here? She loads that bullet into that gun and she shoots Rooker instantly. Boom, one shot and he is back down and dead.
Right. And AH-Sam is fighting off Smits. And
right.
There's knives pulled and AH-Sam is able to disarm Smits and he stabs him in the shoulder.
Right.
And leaves him there, which I was a little surprised he didn't kill him, but he left him there.
Off. Yeah.
He didn't finish him off. And then they were like, they got out of there.
Well, before they got out of there, this is where AH-Sam now starts piecing some stuff together like us. And he looks at her and he just goes, he like points in her face, doesn't even say a word. He just goes, and then they take off. And that's when they got to run.
As far as he knows, he's not going to get any prize money now. That's all out the window. This whole reason he came.
Yeah, this whole thing just went to shit for them, right? Because his plan was to go home with his share of the 2,500. Vega was obviously getting cut in on that. His share of the 2,500, and now that's out the window. And now they got to run for their lives. And of course, the minute they get outside, Smits is behind them. $2,000 to whoever kills them. And you got all these ruffians who are all there for the tournament now, starving for that money.
Right. And now they have to fight off the whole village or whatever you want.
Time to fight again. Just more the usual, right?
Right. It was Yung Jun said. Yeah, I think that's what Yung Jun said. What now? And then AH-Sam hands him his knives back and goes, the usual, I think he said, or something like that.
Yeah. So it's a pretty good fight. There's a lot of action going on. Everyone's getting involved. Hong's got his action. Yung Jun's got his action. AH-Sam, Rosalita, she takes a couple of shots, but also gives a few out. But the good fortune of, runs out quickly because they're outnumbered. And that's when Smits and Mr. Rooker show up and the jig is up in a sense. And it's lock them up and put him in this police cage. Smith says something like, if it was up to me, I'd slaughter the four of you right here. But, Mrs. Rooker over here doesn't have a stomach for frontier justice. So off to Sacramento, you go for trial. Something like that, he says.
And then to be hung. He notably said you're going to trial and then to be hung.
Right. So he's already declared them guilty. And that's when they get thrown into this cage and they get locked up, and they are heading out of town, right? This marshal is, horse-drawn cage carriage pulling them along, and they're sitting in the cage well into the desert, I guess. They're outside of town, and AH-Sam finally, he's like, I cannot believe you used me.
Yeah, we don't know that he seems like he's as upset about being used as he is about losing the money.
I think he's really upset about being used. The money is the money, right? Like that's his problem and Yung Jun's problem and Hong's problem to some degree. But the being used part, that's just his problem, right? And Vega was someone he trusted. Remember, they just had sex the night before. So AH-Sam has a right to be kind of upset here. But her answer is nothing. She doesn't say a word back. And now she's kind of like got like a little smile on her face. And he says, like, what are you smiling about? And that's when the carriage stops.
Right. Well, he said we're going to get killed in Sacramento, and then she says, "Well, we better not go to Sacramento then." And then they
and
then they stop. Yeah.
And that's when you're like, "What's going on here?" Because the marshal comes around back and unlocks the cage and lets them out.
Yep.
So it's like, what's going on?
And just like the dinner, the viewers and AH-Sam, and for that matter, Yung Jun and Hong are all like, what's going on? Only Rosalita knows what's going on in this situation.
Yeah. And then that's when Mrs. Rooker shows up. And you're like, wait a minute, now what's going on? And when the two women see each other, they embrace, and you're like, oh.
That's the sister she was talking about.
There
all these little things that come up in the beginning of the episode, now they mean something.
All comes together.
It all comes together,
man.
Yeah,
and that's what makes the show so good, the writing so good. This episode in particular, so good, because this was almost like a Pulp Fiction episode where you don't even know what was going to happen until like at the end of The Usual Suspects, when Chaz Palminteri's character is looking at like the bulletin board and he sees Skokie, Illinois, and he sees all those little other clues.
Yeah,
and it all dawns on him. That's what happens here to us as viewers. You're like, huh? Oh. But then before we can fully enjoy their victory, Smith shows up again.
Well, Rosalita and AH-Sam are talking. She says, will you come with me? Give it all up. And that's when Smith shows up, and before he can answer, and he shoots her in the back, and we see her blood on AH-Sam. And then Yung Jun takes out Smith's with his knife, and then Rosalita's sister and AH-Sam are cradling her there by her. She's on the ground, and she goes, "Would you have come with me?" And AH-Sam says, "Of course I will." We don't know if that's the truth.
Yeah,
I think it probably isn't the truth, but he says it. And then she says her final line of the episode. She goes, well, one of us is going home.
So I blew it a little bit. I bounced way too far ahead, and I skipped over a bunch of stuff that happened before what you just described, Mike. And that was because of the part where I said Smith shows up, and I was ahead of that. What happened was Vega explains that now that their plan is complete and Rooker is dead, Marisol inherits everything as his wife. And so essentially they've got their family land back. And that's when she says, so I'm staying. You want to stay with me?
Right.
And he's like, nah, that's when she gets up. But before that too, Mrs. Rooker gives him the prize money.
Right. So they get their money. So that problem is solved.
Right. And that's when, I guess this is goodbye. And that's when Smith shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kills Vega. Vega gets shot. You hear the bullet come from the distance, and Vega is shot, and she's down. And Yung Jun springs into action and knifes him. But it's a tough scene, man, because Vega dies right there. AH-Sam says, "Yes, I would have stayed." That was like her last words. Obviously, he was just being a nice guy there at the end, because he was going to go back. And I think she And I think she knows he was going to go back anyway because she says to him, at least one of us gets to go home.
Yeah, yeah, and I think she was talking about herself, but
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, it was a tough scene, but it was, and the episode's not quite over yet, but
No,
yeah, it is
no.
one of the best episodes ever. The way, just the way everything all came together, and all those little things you missed at the beginning, or you may not have noticed in the beginning, and how they were such a pivotal part of the episode in the end, and how it all tied together, as
All
you
little
said.
bricks that they layered on top of each other until they finally built an entire, puzzle together and you see the full picture. They
Yeah,
bury Vega, you see kind of, the sun is setting and there's a cross representing the grave in the silhouette and the scene is over. The next scene, it's clear they're back in Chinatown. You could tell by the dingy streets, you could tell because it's wet, you could tell
right.
by the cobblestone, and then you see the three of them walking back, AH-Sam, Yung Jun, and Hong. And they open the door to Hopway headquarters. They walk in, and there's like, I guess, the entire council and
Yeah,
Father June sitting there waiting for him.
yeah, and he's pissed.
And he's pissed.
Oh, actually, one other thing I forgot to mention about this episode is that it was directed by Dustin Gwen,
I
by
saw
Zing.
that.
Right. And I don't know if this is the first episode where a cast member directed. I don't know that for sure, but it is an episode where a cast member directed it. I don't know if it's
That's
the first.
awesome. The
So,
episode closes with Yung Jun, AH-Sam, and Hong walking in. They're faced with the council and Father June. You said that Father June was pissed, and he certainly is, because he says to Yung Jun, you've got some serious fucking explaining to do.
Lucy, you got some explaining to do.
That's it. And that is where the episode ends, Mike. So now, you know, a lot happened here. We lose Vega as a character. We get another one of those fully enclosed stories that is separate
Bottle
from
episode.
Bottle episode, separate from the entirety of the timeline. So other than what we saw happen in this one episode, things in Chinatown and the proper timeline of what's going on here has not advanced in any way until the very end here, where we have to assume Father June is onto them in some form or other. But we don't know what yet. And these writers are a little tricky. And I kind of get the feeling that this serious fucking explaining to do might not have to do with the opium. Just a hunch.
Well, we'll find out.
We're going to find out next week when we talk about episode 7, season 2 of Warrior. Only 4 episodes to go here in season 2, Mike, for us to review.
I know, it goes by so quick.
It really does. Please like and subscribe to our channel. We're still sitting on like 4 subscribers, and I wish like we can get to like 10. Can like the 4 of you tell other people, please? Press that button. Share the good news about what we're doing here. Share the good news about the show. Share the good news about Netflix, and we will see you next week.